everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be doing another random ass anime review since it has been a while since I last did one. And this is another short OVA series of 6 episodes, and that happens to be Eternal Filena. So this anime is based after a series of light novels that was written by Takashi Shudo. And if you could believe it, he actually did wrote some of the scripts for a very popular show called Pokemon. And if you're watching this video, you probably never even heard of Pokemon. Of course, I'm just fucking kidding. Anyways, so now let's start talking about the story in Eternal Filena. So it begins in the kingdom of Filena, which is being attacked by the ruling empire. And there were absolutely no survivors except for one, and that one person happened to be Filena herself, and she was a young baby at the time. But not only was she the only survivor of the kingdom of Filena, but she was also the only survivor of the royal family in there. And how she continues to survive is that she ends up getting taken care of by Xena. So Xena is a gladiator that ends up training Filena as a boy, because in this show, boys end up getting trained into becoming gladiators, while the girls end up being trained into becoming prostitutes. So he doesn't really like the idea of this, so he ends up wanting to train her as a gladiator. So very similar to the other series that I've looked at before, called Rose of Versailles. In fact, this show does remind me of that one quite a lot. So before Filena gets into her first fight at the arena, she ends up getting a female slave, aka a prostitute, and her name is Lilia. And at first, Lilia had no idea that Filena was a chick because, everyone thinks that Filena is a boy. But after she realizes, she promises to keep it a secret. And of course, Filena doesn't try to do anything funky with her. And as you might suspect, she ends up getting her ass kicked in the arena, but does end up making a comeback and ends up winning. But things are never easy on them, mostly due to the fact that the headmasters of the arena always try and find any way possible to get Filena eliminated and possibly killed. For an example, they happen to be pulling the strings and end up wanting to have her fight against Xena, who is her mentor. And they also pull off a bunch of other crazy shit. And later on, when Filena starts winning matches, it seems like that her and Lilia had to be spread apart, but before that happens, the only way that they could stay together is that she actually has to marry her, since no one realizes that Filena is actually a girl. So those two end up living together without having to live inside the dorms of the arena, and Lilia is not considered as an official slave anymore. But Filena is still doing matches mostly for the fact that some of the head guys at the arena are a bunch of assholes, and she also wants to discover the truth surrounding the mysteries of her lineage. And that right there pretty much sums up what you need to know about Eternal Filena. It's a fairly simple story, and it is a lot like Rose of Versailles if it was setting in Rome, but I'll get more on that much later. So for now, let's start talking about the animation. And for 1992 standards, the animation here is really not that great, unfortunately. Now, if this was something that was released in like the early 80s or like the late 70s, or hell, just in the 70s in general, then yeah, I think it would look okay, but for 1992, yeah, I've seen way better. There's just not a whole lot of detail to most things, like the backgrounds and to the character designs, and I actually do like some of the character designs, but for the most part though, they just look kind of alright. And it is also unfortunate because I really do like the setting in here because it's like Rome, but also does have some future-like ideas like floating cars and such, so yeah. It is unfortunate that the animation here is definitely not the best, but it's also not the worst I've ever seen either. It's just for the time it came out, I think it could have looked way better. So now, as for the show's music, this is probably my favorite part because the music in this show is pretty fucking great. So not only do all the songs fit the tone of the show, but they also just sound really great, and they also make the scenes much more memorable. But probably my favorite song in this would have to be that one that kinda has that little mini guitar solo that usually plays when everything is subtle. It's just fantastic. Also, the opening theme song is really nice too. It's very relaxing and very soft sounding, which I think suits this one really nicely. So yeah, overall, I really can't make any complaints about the music in this one, and like I said, it's probably the best part about it. So yeah, give it a listen whenever you can. And now, as for the show's voice acting, this one never got an English dub, so I can't really say much about the quality since, I can't speak Japanese and all that shit. I've said this shit so many times. So you all should know the drill by now. I can't really say much about the quality, but everything does sound pretty fine, so yeah, no complaints here. So before I continue on and talk about the overall score, I do have a little bit of complaints I have to make. So while the story of this one is very simple and easy to understand, the unfortunate thing about it is that it's really not that in-depth of a show. Now, obviously, because this show only has like 6 episodes, there are going to be some things that are going to feel kind of rushed. And the only 2 characters that are actually memorable are obviously Filena and Lilia, but the rest of them, yeah, I really just couldn't give much of a fuck about them. But are those 2 characters, at the very least, well written? Well, kinda. Now, while I do like the interactions between the 2, unfortunately, other than that, there's not really a whole lot else to go on about them, and of course, the show's ending is actually kinda disappointing. And one thing that did get kind of annoying is that there was way too many flashbacks. Now, I fully understand why there are flashbacks in a show like this, since, you know, the main character can't really remember much of the past, but they happen so often and for so long that it just gets kind of fatiguing. Also, the action scenes are a little bit stilted, which is really unfortunate. So that takes care of all the negative things that I gotta say about the story, so now let's start moving on to the overall score. So, if I were to rate this one, I think I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. It's not bad, but I don't think it's good either. I just think it's okay. But it is mostly disappointing, considering that I did thought the concept of the show was really interesting. So yeah, it just really lacked a lot, and it really makes me wonder what the books were like. I'm sure they're a hell lot better than this, but don't get me wrong, like I said, I don't think the show is like completely drop dead fucking awful. I just think that given the concept that the show was, it just could have been a lot better. Also, the animation, as I said, also could have been a hell lot better considering the time it was made. So obviously, when it comes to 2 shows starting 2 female characters that are grown up as boys, being this one and Rose of Versailles is like a bajillion times better. Now sure, that show did have its slow moments, but at least watching it through from beginning to end was not only like very interesting and also very entertaining, but also at least the ending was really fucking great, where this one is just kind of okay. So yeah, unfortunately, Eternal Filena, I wasn't really too huge on it, but I didn't think it was the worst thing ever, because it seems like a lot of people say this one is like really fucking bad, but nah, there's like way worse shit that I've seen than this. I mean, it's a hell lot better than stupid fucking Ice, which was the last thing I reviewed. So yeah, Eternal Filena is just kind of okay, just very disappointing considering its concepts. Well, hopefully the game that was released on Super Famicom is much better.